Let's build a bookshelf, but let's give it pocket doors. I think this is what they call a lawyer or a barrister bookcase, whatever you want to call it. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make one. I'm building this project for a friend of mine who had seen a similar version online but was made from cheap particle board. So she asked me to build her one instead. When she showed it to me, I had no idea that these types of bookcases were even a thing. But apparently, I just live under a rock because they're actually pretty popular and have been around for a while. Where have I been? These can be dressed up extra fancy with thick, chunky, or curved legs, super decorative trim, or stained glass, but I'm not really into that, so I just kept this one clean lined, modern, and simple. I cut down a sheet of 3/4 inch red oak plywood to build the main body with. I've included the full cut list in the plans that I've linked below, but I needed 2 sides, 4 shelves, 2 thin top supports, and a bottom toe kick. These parts always make a little bit more sense once the pieces start coming together, so just hang with me. Some of these plywood edges will be exposed in the finished project, so before assembling, I did apply some iron-on edge banding to the front of the shelves, the front of the sides, and the front edge of one of the top supports. Then I pulled out my pocket hole jig and drilled pocket holes in my shelves, supports, and the toe kick. If you don't like pocket holes, feel free to use another joinery method of your choosing. But all of the pocket holes will be hidden once the pocket doors are installed. I used the toe kick piece to help me position my bottom shelf to one side panel first, then I attached the top support strips. Then I could just measure between them to figure out my shelf spacing because, contrary to what you would probably like to believe, I had not planned this out beforehand. So I measured the available space, subtracted the thickness of my shelves, and divided by 4 so that I could space these all out equally. By the way, this bookcase is super easy to modify if you wanted to add more shelves or less shelves or make it taller or shorter. So go as crazy as you'd like, we're just building a box. Once the shelves were secured to one side, I flipped it over to attach the other side. Then I came back to add the toe kick piece under the bottom shelf. Next was adding the back panel, so I pulled out a sheet of 1/4 inch plywood and cut it down to fit the shelf. I just stapled this panel over the back side because the top and the trim that I'll add next will hide all of these edges. Speaking of trim, this wasn't really even necessary, and you can customize this 100 ways, but I thought that adding a little trim on the sides might make it look a little bit more substantial, or like maybe not so skinny. So I trimmed this bookcase with 1x2s vertically. Because the toe kick piece was 2.5 inches tall, I used a wider 1x3 piece at the bottom to kind of match, but I used another 1x2 at the top. Then to finish up the actual bookcase part, I cut a 3/4 inch plywood top panel, edge banded the sides, and secured it through the top supports. If you wanted to stop here, you've got a really nice, clean looking bookcase. Simple, practical, and modern. But we're obviously not stopping here, so let's shift focus to the doors. I have a whole separate video on how I build my cabinet doors that I will link below for more detail on this process. But since my openings were all the same size, I cut 1x3 red oak pieces to build 4 identical size door frames. These doors will have glass, well, actually acrylic panels. So for now, I'm just assembling the frames and I'll add those later. When making glass panel doors, I like to assemble using dowels. No real reason. That's just my go-to choice. So that's what I went with here. After the glue had dried on my frames, I sanded them well, then I routed a rabbet on the back side that was just deep enough to fit my acrylic sheet. And because the rabbeting bit left my corners round, I needed to come back and chisel the corners square. I used a roughly 3/16 inch thick piece of acrylic, so this was pretty shallow. Thankfully, it didn't take too long to chisel these out. Now, I'm not going to add the acrylic just yet because it'll be much easier to finish everything first. So I stained the door frames and the bookcase with Minwax weathered oak wood stain, then I sealed it with a few coats of Minwax polyacrylic. Honestly, the worst part of this project was just dealing with the logistics of when to do what part. Believe it or not, we are actually almost done with this project, and the last part is the best part. So I've got my shelf and my doors finished. I still have to cut the plexiglass for the doors, and I'll do that in just a little bit. But let's talk about the pocket door hardware. So not all pocket cabinet door hardware looks exactly the same, but generally they're all pretty similar. To install a pocket door like this, you'll need hinges because the door does still hinge open, and you need slides because the door slides into the cabinet. A few years ago, I actually built a pocket door cabinet and I used a different style of hardware than I'm using now. For that hardware, I bought the slides separately and I thought I could just use like a regular cabinet door hinge. That's when I realized they make specialty pocket door hinges specific for that application. Now, I was able to use a regular style cabinet door hinge, which is cheaper than these, but I had a lot of trouble getting my spacing correct, so I really do recommend using the appropriate pocket door cabinet hinge. The kit that I bought for this project comes with both the slides and the hinges, so that's kind of nice. By the way, these slides come in different lengths depending on how deep your cabinet is and how big your door is and how you want it to slide in, so just keep that in mind. I will link exactly what I'm using in the description below. One quick note about these pocket cabinet door hinges. I did not do a comprehensive search of the entire internet. It looks like most of them that I could find require a 40mm hinge cup hole. If you're familiar with the Craig concealed hinge jig, this is a 35mm Forstner bit. Standard cabinet door hinges usually use a 35mm hole. These are 40. Another great thing about this kit that I bought is that it actually comes with the 40mm Forstner bit. So that's really nice that this comes with the kit, since this isn't probably a specific size that you would just have laying around. So if you can see by this picture, essentially what we'll do is we're mounting the slides to a strip of wood, and then we mount the hinges to that strip of wood. I cut these strips about 3 inches wide and about a ½ inch narrower than my cabinet openings. Okay, so these slides mount to these pieces through these brackets. The instructions do not tell you how far from the edge to mount these, so I'm just gonna do like 1.5 inches. Since these are mounting to the underside of each shelf, I flipped this bookshelf upside down to install. Part of the slides with the rollers faces the front. It doesn't have to be exact, but I want to make sure that the gaps here are pretty even on both sides. So these need to be inset from the front edge, at least the thickness of the door, but then to allow for a gap, I'm going to go 1 inch. Since my doors are 3/4 inch thick, I'm going to use my Craig Multi-Mark, set it 1 inch to set these in. A speed square is helpful here to keep the slides square when attaching. Next, I need to drill the hinge cup holes. So I'm gonna put my 40mm bit into my drill. So the instructions say that the edge of the hole needs to be 12mm from the edge of the door. So since the hole is 40mm diameter, that means the center of the hole needs to be 32, and then 70mm from the other edge. So I'm gonna use my Craig multi-mark. It's got centimeters marked on here. And also just keep in mind that these hinges, just like regular cabinet door concealed hinges, they have plenty of adjustments. So if these measurements are off just like a little bit, it's fine. Like don't worry, there's plenty of adjustment. 70. Actually, I'm not marking 70 because it's way too close to the joint on the door. I'm gonna mark it a little bit over. And it just needs to be deep enough that the hinge will sit in there flat. So this is not deep enough. There. So these hinges will mount to this wooden strut so it can slide back and forth. So I'm gonna butt this edge of the door up to the very front of this wood strut. And then I'm gonna back it off like about 1/4 of an inch. Then I'm gonna check that my gaps on each side of the door are even. Then I'm gonna put 2 screws in the slotted holes of the hinges and then check that it's fitting right and adjust as needed before I add the other 2 screws. So slides in, slides out. So this is not flush to the front, so I'm gonna adjust it forward a bit. Okay, so now I'm gonna put the other 2 screws in my hinge. I thought it would be best to make sure that the doors worked okay before adding the acrylic, just in case anything needed to be trimmed or adjusted. So after the door frames were all installed, I kind of backed up a little to cut my acrylic panels to go into each door. The hinges actually overhang the rabbets just a little, so I ended up removing the door frames from the hinges to be able to glue these panels in. I used clear grip Gorilla Glue because it's flexible but strong. And once it was dry, I just popped these doors back on, which apparently I was in too big of a hurry to remember to film. Luckily, this is pretty easy since they kind of pop right back into the hinge cup holes. So because these are inset doors, you can see the doors all like naturally tend to pull in. The hardware kit came with magnetic stoppers. This is gigantic, like absolutely enormous. This piece would need to mount at the bottom, and then this piece would mount on the door. That's ridiculous. Like, this is ridiculous. I'm just gonna take this piece that's supposed to mount to the door, and it's thick enough that it will stop the door, but not gigantic enough that it takes up like literally half the shelf. Perfect. The hardest part of installing any of this is these bearings and trying to get them in the right spot. Basically, you want them far enough back from the front edge so that when the door closes, it's not in the way. But you also need it far enough down that when you open the door like this, the bearing needs to be below the door. But when you push it back, you also don't want it to be like sagging, like you don't want it super low. So I've been playing around and I've yet to figure out what the ideal location is. I'm just guessing. To install these bearings, I just kind of held them up where I thought they should go, just below the door, and made an indentation with the screw tip. Then I could pre-drill at the mark and screw this in by hand. So one last thing, these slides, when you pull the door forward, it kind of locks at the front, so you kind of have to pull it forward firmly and then lower it. If you don't, then they won't be fully forward and they might not shut correctly. And after adding a few knobs and cleaning the dust off the doors, I was thoroughly excited with how this Barrister style bookcase turned out. It's not too crazy, but it is a little unexpected and such a neat conversation piece. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it come together as much as I enjoyed figuring out this pocket door stuff, and I hope you'll stick around for plenty more projects to come soon. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy building!